He pushed the last cardboard box labeled kitchen junk toward the door with his expensive shoe. "Let's be realistic, Jen," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're 38. You have no career. You have nothing." He leaned against the marble countertop of the kitchen he was keeping. "I'm giving you a generous settlement, but we both know it won't last. You'll never find someone better than me. You'll be lucky if you find anyone at all." She stood by the door, clutching her purse, her reflection warped in the steel of the high-end Sub-Zero fridge. His words were meant to be a curse, a final stamp of his superiority. He was wrong. He couldn't have known that his final cruel words were not an ending, but a prophecy, and that his ex-wife's vindication wouldn't just be quiet. It would be broadcast live to millions. The air in the minimalist million-dollar condo was thick with the smell of fresh paint and betrayal. Gregory Greg Shaw hadn't even waited for the ink to dry on the divorce papers before he'd had the entire place redone in shades of Arctic gray and slate. It was a cold, sterile environment perfectly matching the man who now surveyed his domain. Jennifer Jen Allen stood in the foyer, a stranger in the home she had spent 15 years building. Every piece of art she'd chosen was gone, replaced by abstract metal sculptures that looked like angry tangles of wire. "The movers took the last of your things," Greg said, not looking up from his phone. He was texting, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. Jen knew exactly who was on the other end. Tiffany, the 24-year-old paralegal from his real estate firm, Cushman & Wakefield, the one he'd been mentoring for the last year. "I know, Greg. I was just taking a final look," Jen murmured, her voice hoarse. He finally looked up, and his eyes were devoid of any warmth. They were the eyes of a businessman closing a deal. "A final look at what? This isn't your life anymore, Jennifer. It's time to accept that." 15 years, Greg. I supported you when you were just an intern. I put my own degree on hold to build this life with you." Her voice cracked, a sound she despised. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry. Greg sighed, an exaggerated, impatient sound. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Oh, here we go. The 'I sacrificed everything' speech. Let's be clear. You put your degree, an art history degree, mind you, on hold because you didn't have the drive to finish it. I built this. I made the money. You just spent it. And frankly, you weren't even that good at it." The cruelty was so casual, so practiced. This was the man who used to bring her coffee in bed, the man who'd held her hand during a terrifying miscarriage years ago. That man was gone, replaced by this polished, empty shell. "I'm just trying to understand where this came from," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "It came from boredom, Jen," he said, stepping closer. He still wore the cologne she'd bought him for his last birthday, a woody, expensive scent from Tom Ford. Now it made her nauseous. "I'm a shark, Jen. I need to keep moving forward. You were ballast. Comfortable but heavy. I'm moving up. I'm aiming for partner. Tiffany understands that. She's hungry. You just want to bake." His disdain for her passion was a familiar knife. He'd always called her baking puttering. "So that's it." She straightened her back, pulling the strap of her worn leather bag onto her shoulder. The bag was a relic from before the money, a time she'd mistakenly thought was happier. "That's it." He pushed the last cardboard box labeled kitchen junk toward the door with his $800 Salvatore Ferragamo loafer. It was filled with her favorite whisks, her mother's old recipe book, and her well-worn apron. "Let's be realistic, Jen," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're 38. You have no career. You have nothing." He leaned against the marble countertop of the kitchen he was keeping. "I'm giving you a generous settlement, but we both know it won't last. You're not smart with money. You're too emotional." "It's not generous, Greg. It's half of what I'm owed. Your lawyers buried mine in paperwork." "That's how the game is played, sweetheart," he scoffed. "And you're not a player. You're a hobbyist. And the world is run by professionals." He paused, looking her up and down. She was wearing simple jeans, a worn sweater, and no makeup. Her dark curly hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She knew she looked tired. She felt ancient. "I'm just saying," he continued, "don't come crying to me in 6 months when you've blown through the cash and you're working as a barista, because I won't help you. I would never ask you for anything, Greg, ever again." "Good." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll never find someone better than me. You'll be lucky if you find anyone at all. I was the best thing that ever happened to you." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp as glass. "You'll never find someone better." It was his final verdict on her life. Jen stared at him, a flicker of something new. Not sadness, but a cold, hard anger igniting in her chest. She didn't say a word. She simply picked up the box of kitchen junk, turned, and walked out of the condo. She didn't look back as the heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, sealing off 15 years of her life. Down on the street, parked in a no-parking zone, was a gleaming white Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Tiffany was in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, tapping impatiently on her phone. She glanced up as Jen emerged, a look of pure, triumphant scorn on her face. Jen met her gaze, held it, and then walked past, her knuckles white as she gripped the cardboard box. Her new life was waiting. It was a tiny one-bedroom apartment on Pearl Street, smelling of old carpet and faint curry from the neighbors. It was a world away from the Arctic gray condo and the smell of Tom Ford. That night, Jen didn't unpack. She sat on the floor of her empty living room, the city lights of Denver just a distant glow. She opened the box labeled kitchen junk. She pulled out her mother's recipe book, the binding cracked and stained with vanilla extract. She cried. She cried for the man she'd loved, for the baby she'd lost, for the years she'd wasted. She cried until she was empty. And then around 2 a.m. she stood up. She walked into the tiny dated kitchen with its laminate counters and avocado green stove. She opened the recipe book to a page marked Grandma's Lemon Tart. She found the flour and sugar she'd bought on the way over. She found her whisk. And in the silence of her new small life, with Greg's curse echoing in her ears, "You'll never find someone better." Jen Allen started to bake. The sharp, clean scent of lemons began to fill the room, the first good smell in a very long time. She was a hobbyist. She was a nothing. But as she folded the butter into the flour, her hands for the first time in years felt steady. The first 6 months were a blur of powdered sugar and panic. The generous settlement after paying the deposit on the apartment and buying a used rattling 2008 Honda Civic was terrifyingly small. Jen knew Greg was right about one thing: it wouldn't last. She applied for jobs. She went to interviews at art galleries and museums. The responses were always the same. 15 years is a long gap, Mrs. Allen. We're looking for someone with more recent digital curation experience. She was a relic. The panic attacks started waking her in the cold dread of 3 a.m. Greg's voice was a constant loop in her head. "You're nothing without me. Lucky if you find anyone at all." Her only solace was the tiny kitchen. She baked. She baked to stay sane. She baked because it was the only thing she knew how to do well. She gave her creations away to her neighbors, to the mailman, to the woman at the dry cleaner. It was her best friend Sarah, a no-nonsense ER nurse, who finally snapped her out of it. Sarah came over after a 12-hour shift, took one bite of a chocolate lavender scone, and slammed her hand on the counter. "Jen, this is not a scone," Sarah declared. Jen flinched. "What's wrong with it?" It's a religious experience. It's a work of art, and you're giving it away." "I don't know what else to do with it, Sarah." "You sell it. You stop applying for jobs you don't even want. You take that kitchen junk box of yours and you turn it into a business." "A business, Sarah? I wouldn't even know how. A bakery." "No, not a bakery. Not yet. A farmer's market stall. The one at Cherry Creek. It's expensive, but it's the best. You've got to be around people who will pay for quality." So with Sarah's help, Jen liquidating the last of her old life, a pair of diamond earrings, Greg had bought her a designer handbag and used the money to buy a tent, a foldable table, a business license, and ingredients. In bulk. She called her fledgling business the Mixing Bowl. The first day at the Cherry Creek Farmers Market was a disaster. She woke up at 4 a.m. It was a cold, rainy May morning. Her tent almost blew away. People hurried past clutching coffee cups, heading for the established vendors. She'd made $300 worth of pastries. By 11 a.m. she had sold one muffin, to a very sympathetic-looking child. She was packing up early, tears of humiliation stinging her eyes when a man stopped at her stall. He was tall, dressed in a simple, almost worn Patagonia jacket and jeans. He had kind, tired eyes and a few days' worth of stubble. He looked, Jen thought, as exhausted as she felt. "You're closing up?" he asked. His voice was quiet, gentle. "Seems so," Jen said, trying to sound breezy. "Not a big day for lemon tarts." He looked at the small, perfect tarts. "That's a shame. They look like the best ones here." "They're the only ones here," she said with a watery laugh. He smiled. "My wife. She used to love lemon tarts. I haven't had a good one in a long time." The "used to" hung in the air. Jen understood loss. "Well, take one. On the house," she said. "No, I couldn't. Please. Otherwise I'm just going to eat them all myself in my car." He chuckled, a nice warm sound. He pulled out his wallet. "I'll take 4. And I'm paying for all of them." He paid with a crisp $100 bill and told her to keep the change. I don't have change for this," she stammered. "Then I guess I'll have to come back next week to get my change in pastries," he said. He picked up the bag. "Thank you. These smell like hope." He walked away before she could say anything else. His name was Rob. He came back the next week. And the week after. He became her first regular. He never talked about his work. He talked about books, about the weather, about her baking. He'd ask, "What's the story behind this one?" And she'd tell him about her grandmother's oatmeal cookies or the pear and cardamom bread she'd invented when she couldn't sleep. He was just Rob, a kind, quiet man who liked her baking. Her business grew, slowly, painfully. She wasn't getting rich, but she was paying her rent. The Mixing Bowl was getting a small, loyal following. Then one sun-drenched Saturday in July, the past walked up to her stall. Greg and Tiffany. Jen's stomach dropped to the floor. Greg was wearing a crisp polo shirt and expensive sunglasses. Tiffany, clinging to his arm, looked like a living Instagram filter, all perfect teeth and highlighted hair. "Well, well, well," Greg said, his voice loud enough for the other customers to hear. He looked at her tent, her handwritten sign, her simple pastries. The same sneer she remembered from the condo was plastered on his face. "A little bake sale. How quaint." "Hello, Greg," Jen said, her hands gripping the edge of her table. I'm almost impressed," he continued, gesturing to her lemon tarts. "You finally found a way to make money from your puttering. How much do you clear a day? $50, $100? Tiffany giggled, a high, tinkling sound. "It's cute, Greg, like a little girl's lemonade stand." "So this is what you're doing," Greg said, his voice dropping to a faux sympathetic tone. "This is the big new life, selling cookies in a tent. I told you, Jen. I told you this is where you'd end up." Jen's face was burning. She could feel the eyes of her other customers. She could see Mrs. Davis, her elderly jam vendor neighbor, looking on with concern. "I'm working, Greg," Jen said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm supporting myself. Please, if you're not going to buy anything, I have other customers." Greg laughed. "Buy something, honey. I can buy a real bakery. I don't need this." He waved a dismissive hand. "It's just sad. I almost feel sorry for you." "Don't," Jen said, her anger finally eclipsing her shame. "Don't you dare feel sorry for me. You don't have the right." "Oh, feisty," Tiffany chimed in, stepping forward. "Look, Jen, I'm glad you're Keeping busy. But Greg and I were on our way to brunch at the Broadmoor. We're closing on a house in Cherry Hills next week. He's doing so well. She patted Greg's arm. He just made partner at the firm. It was a lie. Jen knew he was still just a vice president. But the lie was for her benefit. Congratulations, Jen said, her voice flat. Yeah, well. Greg tossed a $20 bill on the table. It landed on a tray of scones. Here, for old time's sake, buy yourself a new apron or something. He and Tiffany turned and walked away laughing. Jen stared at the $20 bill crumpled on her pastries. She felt the same old cold shame wash over her. You'll never find someone better. You're nothing. She didn't see Rob standing at the edge of the tent holding his usual bag, having witnessed the entire ugly exchange. His kind eyes were now cold, and they weren't looking at Jen. They were fixed on Greg's retreating back. He watched them get into a brand-new metallic blue Porsche Cayenne and speed off. He stepped up to the table. Jen was trying to discreetly throw away the scone the money had touched. "Don't throw it away," Rob said quietly. Jen jumped startled. "Rob, I'm sorry you saw that." "He's your ex-husband," Rob stated. It wasn't a question. Jen nodded, her throat tight. "He seems unpleasant." "That's one word for it," Jen said, trying for a laugh and failing. Rob pushed the $20 bill back toward her. "Take this." "I don't want it." "Take it. Put it in your register. It's the price of admission for the show he just put on. Don't let him think he got to you." He then pulled out his own wallet. "And I'll take my usual 4 lemon tarts, and a dozen of those scones he insulted." Jen looked at him, gratitude welling up. "Rob, you don't have to do that." "I know," he said, handing her the cash. "But I want to. That man, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Your work is incredible, Jen, and so are you." He left, and Jen watched him go, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the July sun. She took Greg's $20 bill and, smoothing it out, put it in her cash box. It was the last dollar he would ever give her. Summer bled into fall. The mixing bowl was turning a real, albeit tiny, profit. Jen had moved from just the Saturday market to Sundays as well. She'd hired a part-time helper, a college student named Maria. The 4 a.m. mornings were still brutal, but the work felt honest. It felt like hers. Her friendship with Rob deepened. He was no longer just a customer, he was a friend. They'd grab coffee after the market closed, sitting on a park bench talking for hours. She learned about his wife Sarah, a different Sarah who had passed away 2 years prior, after a long battle with cancer. He spoke of her with a profound, gentle sadness, but also with a smile. He told her he'd been drifting, as he put it, before he'd stumbled on her stall. He in turn learned about Greg, not the details of the abuse, but the ghost of it. He understood the shadow, as he called it, that Greg had cast over her. "He defined you," Rob said one crisp October afternoon, "and now you're getting to define yourself. It's the hardest and best work a person can do." Jen felt a pull toward him, a safe, quiet attraction she hadn't allowed herself to feel. But he was just Rob, her kind, widowed friend. She was just Jen, the divorced baker. It was simple. One Tuesday, Jen was elbow-deep in flour testing a new pumpkin chai recipe when her phone buzzed. An email. The subject line read, "Media Inquiry, Good Day Denver." Her heart hammered. Good Day Denver was the city's #1 morning show. She opened it with trembling, flour-dusted fingers. "Dear Ms. Allen, my name is Brenda Walsh, and I am a producer for Good Day Denver on Channel 7. We are running a new segment called Community Spotlight, focusing on local entrepreneurs who have started fresh and are making a difference. Your name was recommended to us as an inspiring local success story. We would love to feature you and the Mixing Bowl live in our studio next Friday, October 20th, during the 8 a.m. hour. Please let me know if you are available. We think your story is exactly what our viewers need to see. Best, Brenda Walsh, producer. Good Day Denver." Jen read it 3 times. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. Who recommended her? She called Sarah the nurse. Was it you? Did you call Channel 7? What? Jen, I'm stitching up a guy who tried to juggle a chainsaw. I love you, but no. Why? Jen told her. Sarah screamed so loud the patient probably jumped. You're going to be famous. You have to do it. Jen was terrified. Live TV. What if she said something stupid? What if she froze? What if Greg saw the thought of Greg seeing her almost made her decline? He would mock her. He would find a way to tear it down. She told Rob about it at the market that Saturday. His reaction was immediate and absolute. You must do it, Jen. But Rob, I'm a baker. I'm not a story. And I'll be terrible. I'll get nervous and drop a scone on the floor. He put his hands on her shoulders, his gaze steady. Jen, look at me. Your story is inspiring. You built this from nothing. You took your pain and you made something beautiful out of it. People need to see that. You need to see that. Who even recommended me? Rob smiled a little mysteriously. Denver is a small town. Word gets around about the best lemon tarts. She agreed. The next few days were a blur of panic planning and baking. Brenda, the producer, was incredibly kind. Just be yourself, she advised over the phone. People will love you. Meanwhile, Greg Shaw was not having a good month. The real estate market had taken a dip. A huge deal he'd been counting on in the tech center had fallen through, and Tiffany was becoming expensive. Her demands for designer bags and weekends in Aspen were constant. He was feeling the pressure. He learned about Jen's TV spot from his mother, who had seen a short promo for it. Isn't that nice? His mother had said. Jennifer is going to be on the news for her little bakery. Greg's blood ran cold. On TV. His failed cast-off wife. Being celebrated. It was an insult. It was a reflection on him. It suggested she was fine without him. He picked up his phone. He found the contact for a guy he'd played golf with, someone high up in ad sales at Channel 7. He sent a text. Hey Mark, need a number for a producer on your morning show? Brenda Walsh. Have some background on a guest she's booked. It's important. He got the number. He called Brenda. Brenda Walsh speaking. Ms. Walsh, my name is Gregory Shaw. I'm Jennifer Allen's ex-husband. There was a pause. Okay. Look, I'm calling out of concern, Greg said, his voice smooth and practiced. Jen, she's not well. She's been through a very difficult, very public breakdown. This divorce, it's unhinged her. Putting her on live TV, I think it's irresponsible. She's fragile. She's unstable. I'm worried she'll have an episode right on your set. It would be a disaster for her and for your show. He laid it on thick, emotional instability, prone to hysterics, not in her right mind. He painted a picture of a woman on the edge. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Brenda spoke, her voice clipped and professional. Mr. Shaw, thank you for your concern. I have met with Ms. Allen. I have also coincidentally heard a few things about you. Let me be very clear. We are not canceling the segment. In fact, we're extending it. Have a nice day. She hung up. Greg stared at his phone, his face purple with rage. She'd heard things about him. How dare she? He threw his phone across his office, where it smashed against one of the metal wire sculptures. He was furious. He'd watch the show. He'd watch her crash and burn. He'd watch her humiliate herself, proving him right. He'd even call Tiffany into his office to watch it with him. You've got to see this, he texted her. My crazy ex-wife is about to have a meltdown on Good Day Denver. It's going to be hilarious. He had no idea what he had just set in motion. Brenda, the producer, immediately got on her headset and called the control room. I want 2 extra cameras on this segment, and get me a feed to the green room. Our other guest needs to see this. The day of the broadcast, Jen woke up at 3 a.m., not to bake, but to be sick. Her nerves were shredded. She tried to practice what she was going to say, but her mind was blank. All she could hear was Greg's voice. You're a hobbyist. You're fragile. You're nothing. What if he was right? What if she got on set and just broke? At 5 a.m. her phone buzzed. A text from Rob. "Jen, I'm outside. I have coffee." She ran down. He was there leaning against a black Audi that looked much nicer than she'd ever noticed. He was wearing his usual jeans but with a nice button-down shirt. He handed her a coffee. "Rob, what are you doing here? It's pouring rain." "I'm your ride," he said simply. "You didn't think I'd let you drive yourself, did you? You'd end up in Nebraska." She started to cry right there on the sidewalk. "I can't do this, Rob. I'm so scared." He didn't hug her. He just stood there solid as a rock. "Yes, you can. You're scared. That's normal. But you're also the woman who built a business from scratch while her entire life was falling apart. You're the strongest person I know. This is just talking. What do I even say? You tell the truth. You tell them about your grandmother's recipes. You tell them why you love the smell of lemons and cardamom. You tell them your story, not the part about him." He said, his voice hardening, "but the part about you." He looked at his watch. "I have to be somewhere this morning, a big meeting. But I'll be watching. I promise. I'll text you the second you're done. Now get in the car. You're going to be great." He drove her to the Channel 7 studio, the big meeting clearly on his mind. He seemed preoccupied checking his phone, but he was still a calming presence. He dropped her at the front entrance, gave her a quick supportive squeeze on the arm, and said, "Knock 'em dead, Jen. I'll be rooting for you." She watched him drive off, his words giving her a small flickering flame of confidence. The studio was chaotic. People with headsets were running everywhere. Brenda, the producer, met her, a warm smile on her face and a fire in her eyes. "Jen, you look fantastic. We're so excited." She was bustled into makeup, where a kind woman covered the dark circles under her eyes. She had brought her best pastries arranged on beautiful wooden boards Rob had helped her pick out. They set them up on the Good Day Denver kitchen set. It looked professional. Her work, on TV. Brenda led her to the green room. "Mike, the host, will be in to prep you in a minute. We go live at 8:15. Just relax." Jen sat on a plush couch, her leg bouncing. The TV in the green room was playing the show, currently on a long commercial for a car dealership. A few minutes later, another man was escorted into the green room. He was older, in an impeccably tailored navy blue suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He looked powerful. He nodded politely at Jen and sat on the other side of the room, immediately getting on his phone. A lawyer, Jen thought, or a politician. Meanwhile, across town, Greg Shaw poured himself a cup of coffee. He'd come into his Cushman & Wakefield office early. Tiffany sauntered in at 8:10, latte in hand. "Is it time? Is the train wreck about to start?" she asked, perching on his desk. "Any minute now," Greg said, turning on the small TV in his office. 8:15. Get ready to cringe." Back at the studio, Mike Daniels, the host, bounded in. He was all teeth and spray tan. "Jen, you're the baker. Great to meet you. Smells amazing in here." He started running through his questions. "So the mixing bowl. Tell me how that started." As they talked, the man in the suit glanced up from his phone. He was watching Jen, a small, curious smile on his face. "And we're back in 5, a voice yelled from the hall. Mike clapped his hands. "All right, Jen, let's go sell some scones." Brenda led Jen to the set. The lights were blindingly hot. A cameraman wheeled a huge camera right up to her face. Jen's heart felt like it was going to beat out of her chest. "And we're live." Mike smiled a perfect gleaming smile. "Welcome back to Good Day Denver. If you're just joining us, we're here with our community spotlight. And I am so excited about this one. Folks, meet Jennifer Allen, the owner and founder of the unbelievably good local bakery, The Mixing Bowl." The camera's red light glowed. Jen swallowed, her throat dry as dust. "Jen," Mike said, "these pastries are gorgeous. Tell us, how did The Mixing Bowl begin?" Jen looked at the camera. She pictured Greg and Tiffany watching, waiting for her to fail. Then she pictured Rob. "Tell them your story." She took a deep breath. "Well, Mike," she began, her voice shaking only slightly. "The Mixing Bowl. It started about a year ago. I I was going through a very difficult transition in my life. In his office, Greg leaned in. Here it comes, the breakdown. I'd lost a lot. Jen continued, finding her rhythm. And I found myself in a new apartment with not much else but my grandmother's old recipe book. And I just started baking. I baked because it was the one thing that made sense. It was the one thing that felt like me. And I guess I baked my way back to life. She was good. She was really good. She was natural, vulnerable, and strong. She wasn't just not failing, she was glowing. She talked about her passion for local ingredients, about the joy of seeing a customer's face when they bit into a scone. Greg's smile faded. She rehearsed this, he muttered. She's actually, really good, Tiffany said, sounding disappointed. Mike took a bite of a lemon tart. His eyes widened comically. Jen, I'm not kidding, this is the best lemon tart I have ever had. In my life. Jen blushed. Thank you. It's an old family recipe. Well, the family is brilliant, Mike said, and we're so inspired by your story. A true second act. In the green room, the man in the suit was watching the monitor, his phone forgotten. He was smiling broadly. Now, Jen, Mike said, turning to the camera, we heard you have one customer in particular who is a huge fan, a very loyal customer who comes to your stall every single week. Jen looked confused. I have a few regulars. They're all wonderful. Mike's grin widened. Yes, but this one, in fact, he's the one who suggested you for this spot. He called our producer Brenda personally. Jen was blank. He did who? He said you know him as Rob, Mike said. And he's here today. But Rob, well, he's a little more than just a fan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robert Lawson. Jen's blood turned to ice. What? The man from the green room, the powerful man in the suit, was now walking onto the set, shaking Mike's hand. Greg Shaw in his office froze. His coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on his desk, splashing hot coffee over quarterly reports. No, Greg whispered. No, that's not Robert Lawson. Tiffany, daughter of a finance broker, knew exactly who he was. Oh my God, she breathed. That's the Robert Lawson, CEO of Lawson Global Tech. He's one of the richest men in the state. He's a billionaire, Greg. A billionaire. On the screen, Robert Lawson. Rob was walking past the host and straight toward a completely shell-shocked Jen. He took her hands. He was smiling, his eyes, the same kind, tired eyes she'd always known were sparkling. You're doing amazing, Jen, he said, his voice quiet just for her, though the mic picked it up. Rob, she whispered, her mind unable to compute. The suit. Lawson Global Tech. You told me you had a meeting. I did, he said, turning to Mike but still holding Jen's hand. With your producer Brenda, and then with my legal team. He gestured to the man in the green room who was now standing at the side of the set, briefcase open. Robert? Mr. Lawson? What on earth is going on? Mike, the host, stammered, looking at his teleprompter, which was now just a blank, useless screen. The segment was off the rails, and it was just getting started. The studio was in a state of controlled chaos. Brenda, the producer, was in the control booth, headset clamped on, speaking in a low, urgent voice. Stay on the two-shot, get a camera on Mike's reaction, and whatever you do, do not go to commercial. On set, Mike Daniels was visibly sweating under his makeup. Robert Lawson, this is an incredible surprise. We are honored to have you. I had no idea you were a fan of Good Day Denver. Rob finally let go of Jen's hands, though he kept a proprietary arm around her waist, anchoring her. Jen herself hadn't moved. She was staring at the man she thought she knew, this quiet widower in a Patagonia jacket, who was now revealed as one of the most powerful tech innovators in the country. the man whose name was on the side of the Lawson Innovation Center downtown. "I'm not just a fan of the show, Mike," Robert said, his voice calm and authoritative, the gentle Rob persona replaced by a CEO's command. "I'm a fan of Jennifer. I've been a fan since the first day I tasted one of her pastries." So you're the Rob who recommended her?" Mike asked, trying to regain control of his show. "I am," Robert said. "I called Brenda. I told her that if she was looking for a story about resilience, about talent, about someone turning grit and passion into a real-life success, she had to meet Jen." He turned and looked directly at Jen, his expression softening back into the man she knew. "I'm sorry for the deception, Jen. The just Rob thing. When my wife passed the world, it became very loud. Everyone was Mr. Lawson. Everyone wanted something. I started going to that farmer's market because it was the one place I could just be a guy, anonymous. And then I met you." Jen's mind was racing. The old Audi, the talk of a meeting, the Patagonia jacket, a classic Silicon Valley stealth wealth uniform she'd been too naive to recognize. You own Lawson Global Tech." She whispered the words, feeling absurd on her tongue. "I do," he said. In Greg's office, Tiffany was frantically Googling on her phone. "Greg, his net worth is estimated at $4.8 billion. He's divorced, no widower. His wife died. He's the most eligible bachelor in the country, and he's buying scones from her." Greg was silent. He was staring at the screen, at the way this billionaire was looking at his ex-wife, the way he was touching her. It was a look of pure adoration, a look Greg himself had never not once given her. An icy dread, far colder than his earlier anger, was creeping up his spine. "But Mr. Lawson," Mike the host pressed, "surely you're not just here to endorse the lemon tarts. This is a big gesture." "It is," Robert said, his smile fading. He turned not just to Mike but to camera one, the main camera, the one broadcasting to all of Denver. He was looking, Jen realized, right at Greg. "I'm here," Robert said, his voice dropping, "because I have a story too. I told you I met Jen when I was drifting. I was lost. I'd spent 2 years in a fog of grief, and I met this woman who was building a new life from the ashes of her old one, a life that had been torn down by a man who didn't deserve her." Jen's breath hitched. "Rob, no, it's okay," he said, squeezing her arm. "It's time. You see, Mike, Jen's ex-husband, he's a piece of work, a real estate executive over at Cushman & Wakefield, a man named Gregory Shaw." Boom. The name landed. In the control room, Brenda's jaw dropped. In Greg's office, Greg himself stood up so fast his chair flew back and hit the wall. He named me. He named my firm." Tiffany looked horrified. "Greg." "This man," Robert continued, his voice resonating with cold, controlled fury, "didn't just divorce Jen. He tried to destroy her. He told her she was nothing. He told her she was a hobbyist. He told her she was unstable. In fact," and here he looked right at Brenda, who nodded grimly, "he even called this station yesterday. He tried to get this segment canceled. He told our producer that Jen was fragile and prone to hysterics." Mike Daniels looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He did, Robert confirmed. "He tried to sabotage her. The same way he did just a few months ago when he came to her market stall to mock her, to tell her she was a failure, to throw money at her like she was a beggar." Jen was shaking. This was her private humiliation now being blasted to the entire city. "And," Robert's voice boomed, "he told her one more thing. He looked her in the eye and he told her, 'You'll never find someone better than me.'" Greg Shaw sank back into his chair. He was as pale as a ghost. His office phone began to ring, then his cell phone, then Tiffany's. "He was wrong," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. He turned away from the cameras, away from Mike, and faced Jen fully. The world shrank. It was just the two of them standing in a circle of hot light. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression. "He was wrong about everything," Robert said, his eyes, those kind, familiar eyes, now shining with tears. "You're not nothing, Jen. You are everything. You're the strongest, kindest, most brilliant and resilient woman I have ever met. You're not unstable. You're the most grounded person I know. And your baking, it's not a hobby. It's art. It's the hope that I was missing." "Rob," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "He told you you'd never find someone better." Robert took a shaky breath. "And I'm not him. I'm not arrogant. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better. Trying to be the man that you deserve." And then, to the sound of a million jaws dropping across the city, the tech billionaire Robert Lawson dropped to one knee on the set of Good Day Denver. He reached into his suit jacket. He pulled out a small velvet box. Not from Tiffany & Co., not from a mall jeweler. It was a deep dark blue. From Graf. "Jen," he said, his voice cracking, You saved me. You baked your way back to life, and in the process you saved mine. You taught me how to live again, how to laugh again. I don't want to buy your lemon tarts just on Saturdays anymore. I want to wake up to them and to you every morning for the rest of my life." He opened the box. The ring. It wasn't just a ring. It was a star. A massive cushion-cut diamond, at least 10 carats, flanked by 2 smaller perfect sapphires. It was elegant, timeless, and worth more than Greg's condo, his Porsche, and his entire commission for the year combined. In his office, Tiffany let out a small, strangled squeak. "Jennifer Allen," Robert Lawson said, his voice ringing with absolute sincerity. "You are my second act. You're my only act. Will you marry me?" The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras. Jen stood frozen, the tears on her face illuminated by the studio lights. She looked at the ring, then at the man kneeling before her. This was not a dream. This was Rob. Her Rob, who just happened to be a billionaire, kneeling on a cheap kitchen set asking her to marry him. All the old voices, Greg sneering, the "you're not good enough," the 15-year gap, they all just evaporated. They were burned away by the genuine, loving, hopeful look in Robert's eyes. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "What was that?" Robert whispered back, a grin spreading across his face. "Yes," she said louder. "Yes, Rob. 1,000 times yes." Robert let out a laugh of pure relief and joy. He slid the enormous diamond onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood up, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. It wasn't a chaste television-friendly peck. It was a real kiss, passionate and full of promise, right there on live TV. The studio crew, the producer, even Mike, the host, erupted in applause. Mike, recovering, stumbled back into frame. "Well, I think that's a yes. Congratulations to Jennifer Allen and Robert Lawson. We have to go to a commercial break. Wow. Just wow." The second the show cut to commercial, Brenda's voice came over the studio loudspeaker. "That's the best damn television I've made in 20 years. As the ads for Chevy Truck Month rolled, Greg Shaw's world was ending. His office phone, his cell phone, they were both ringing off the hook. He looked at the caller ID. The managing partner of his firm, the head of HR, his mother. He ignored them. He was staring at the dark screen, at the after image of that ring, that kiss. He planned it," Greg whispered. "The whole thing. He tanked my career on live TV." "He didn't just tank it, Greg," Tiffany said, her voice shaking. She was already backing toward the door, grabbing her purse. "He nuked it. From orbit. He named you. He named the firm." "Tiffany, where are you going?" "Where am I going?" She looked at him, her pretty face twisted in a mask of contempt and panic. "I'm going to my car. I'm going to my apartment, and I'm going to block your number. I am not going down with you. Down with me, I'm a partner. Or, I'm making partner. You're a joke, Greg, she shrieked. You're the guy who let a billionaire's fiancé slip through your fingers because you were busy with me. You told me you were the catch. You told me she was nothing. You're a fool. The entire city just watched you get checkmated by a man who could buy this entire building with his pocket change. But us, he stammered. There is no us, she spat. You're radioactive. I'm not tying my future to you, the guy who mocked the lemon tarts of the future Mrs. Robert Lawson. She yanked open his office door and was gone. Greg was left in the silence, broken only by the incessant shrill ringing of his phones. He looked at the shattered mug on his desk, the coffee soaking into the papers. You'll never find someone better. He had been so sure. It had been his one true belief. He was the prize. On the TV, the commercials ended. Mike Daniels was back, looking dazed. Welcome back to Good Day Denver. We are still processing the most incredible thing that has ever happened on this show. Jennifer, congratulations. That ring. Jen, who was now sitting on a stool, her hands securely in Robert's, laughed. It's a bit much, isn't it? She joked. It's not enough, Robert said, kissing her hand. Now Jen and I have to go, but before we do, I have one last piece of business. He looked at the camera again. The man in the suit, his lawyer, stepped onto the set and handed him a folder. Mr. Shaw, Robert said, his voice flat and cold as steel. You'll be hearing from my legal team. Slander, defamation of character, and intentional infliction of emotional distress are just the beginning. But that's not this. He held up a single crisp piece of paper. This, he said, is a check for $1 million. The studio gasped. It's not for Mr. Shaw. It's for the mixing bowl. No, that's not right. The mixing bowl is perfect as it is. This is the first investment in the Second Act Fund, a new foundation I'm establishing in Jennifer's name. A foundation that will provide grants and startup capital to women just like Jen who are rebuilding their lives and starting businesses after divorce or loss. He handed the check to Jen. She looked at it, her name next to a staggering number of zeros, and she just sobbed a final cleansing wave of emotion. But, Robert added, we will be expanding the mixing bowl. Jen's lemon tarts are going national. Greg Shaw watched numb. It wasn't just a proposal, it was an execution. His ex-wife hadn't just found someone better. She'd found a king, and he had just publicly declared war on the jester who had hurt his queen. The show ended. Jen and Robert were ushered out a back entrance past a sudden frantic swarm of reporters who had gotten the tip. The story was already exploding. It was on TMZ, Page 6, Forbes, and the Denver Post. Tech billionaire Robert Lawson proposes to local baker on live TV. The lemon tart proposal. As they got into Robert's car, a sleek black Bentley, this time driven by a chauffeur, Jen finally turned to him, the $1 million check in her hand. A foundation's second act, she asked. I told you I had a meeting. He smiled. My lawyers were drafting the paperwork. I was going to do it anyway. The proposal, that was a bit more spontaneous. Seeing you on that set so strong and so beautiful, I couldn't wait another second. And the part about Greg naming him, Robert's smile vanished. That was planned. When Brenda told me what he'd done, that he'd tried to hurt you again, I decided it was time for the world to know exactly who he is, and more importantly, who you are. I love you, Rob, she said, leaning her head on his shoulder, the 10-carat diamond feeling impossibly heavy and impossibly right on her finger. I love you, Jen. Now, let's go get some breakfast. I know a place. The fallout was immediate. By 10 a.m., Greg Shaw was called into his managing partner's office at Cushman & Wakefield. The meeting was short. The corporate office are clients. They all saw the show, the partner said, his voice cold. Robert Lawson named us on live television. We have a morals clause, Greg. You are fired. Effective immediately. He was escorted out by security carrying his possessions in a box, a bitter echo of the one he'd pushed at Jen. His personal life collapsed just as fast. Tiffany, seeing her future tied to a radioactive man, had already blocked his number. When Greg arrived at his condo, his key didn't work. He'd put her on the lease. She'd already changed the locks. He ended up at a budget hotel, forced to watch himself become a national villain. TMZ had found a bystander's video of him sneering at Jen's market stall, and they played it on a loop next to the clip of Robert's tearful, loving proposal. Team Jen was trending. While Greg's name became poison, Jen's became an inspiration. The Second Act Fund was a viral sensation. Robert's initial $1 million investment was matched by his billionaire friends, and the foundation had over $10 million before it even had a website. To escape the media storm, Robert took Jen to his private villa in Lake Como. There they planned. Jen was adamant she would not stop baking. The mixing bowl was her identity. So they decided to expand not as a soulless franchise, but as a beautiful flagship bakery in Denver. It would double as a training center for the Second Act Fund, staffing its kitchen entirely with women rebuilding their own lives. Their wedding 6 months later was the opposite of their proposal. It was private, held in the small community garden near Jen's first apartment. Sarah, the nurse, was her maid of honor. Greg's fate was the inverse. Unemployable in Denver, he sold his Porsche, lost the condo, and fled the state. The last anyone heard, he'd changed his name and was working as a used car salesman, a big shot no one believed. 1 year after the proposal, Good Day Denver broadcast a follow-up from the bustling, successful mixing bowl. Mike Daniels found Jen not in a suit but in her flour-dusted apron. "Jen," he said, "you've built an empire of hope." Jen laughed, her diamonds sparkling. "The ring is nice, but—" She pointed to a single mom, now her head baker, laughing as she decorated a cake. That's the real story. Robert joined them back in his Rob uniform and kissed his wife. "I'm the lucky one," he told the camera. "I got the girl and a lifetime supply of the best lemon tarts in the world." And just like that, Jen's story proves that the end of one chapter is never really the end. It's the beginning of a second act. She went from being told she was nothing to becoming the head of a foundation changing hundreds of lives. She lost a man who saw her as a hobby and gained a man who saw her as his entire world. Karma, as they say, always has a way of balancing the books. And sometimes it does it on live television. What did you think of Greg's downfall? Did he get what he deserved? And what about Robert's grand gesture? Was it the most romantic proposal ever? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love this story of justice and second chances, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear that their best days are still ahead, and make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that bell.
What happens when a man's final cruel prophecy is shattered in the most spectacular way imaginable? For Emma Vance, the final words her celebrity ex-husband, Julian Thorne, ever spoke to her were a curse. "You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. You will die alone." He said it with the smug certainty of a man who believed he had authored her entire existence. But what Julian didn't count on, what the world couldn't have predicted, was that the universe had a flair for irony. Less than 12 hours later, Emma Vance wouldn't just be fine. She'd be on the front page of every major news outlet, her name a global trending topic, all because of a single candid photograph, her hand held gently, securely in the hand of the world's most enigmatic and untouchable billionaire. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about what happens the morning after your world ends. The air in the penthouse was cold. It wasn't the fault of the climate control, a state-of-the-art system Julian Thorne had often boasted about in interviews for architectural magazines. It was a frigid, soul-deep cold that emanated from the man himself. Julian, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile engineered for talk show sofas, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the sparkling expanse of New York City, as if he owned it. In many ways, he thought he did. "It's all signed Emma," he said, not turning to look at her. His voice, the same one that calmed millions of his followers with platitudes about unlocking your inner power, was now clipped and sharp as a shard of glass. Emma Vance clutched the pen in her hand, her knuckles white. The final divorce paper sat on the vast marble island in the kitchen, a kitchen she had designed from the veining in the stone to the specific shade of brushed brass on the handles. It was a space meant for warmth, for laughter, for the life she thought they were building. Now, it was just a stage for her public execution. "I know, Julian," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. She hadn't slept in days. For 10 years, she had been Mrs. Thorne, the quiet, supportive wife of the self-help magnate Julian Thorne, author of the global bestseller The Architect of You. She had been the one who edited his manuscripts until 3 in the morning, who fact-checked his research, who coached him through his anxieties before every major speech. She had sacrificed her own burgeoning career as an academic, specializing in Renaissance art, to build his empire, believing his success was their success. The cracks had started as hairline fractures, his casual dismissal of her opinions, his gaslighting her memories of events, the way he'd subtly mock her in front of their influential friends. Then came the affairs which he'd explained away as the unfortunate but necessary burdens of a man of his stature. The final break came when she discovered he wasn't just having an affair. He had a long-term partner, a younger, more malleable version of herself, already installed in a condo he'd bought downtown. Good. He finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her with disdain. She wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to his tailored Zegna suit. She felt like a ghost in her own home. "The movers will be here tomorrow for my remaining effects. Your things? Well, you don't have much, do you? I'll have them put in storage. You have 30 days to collect them." Every word was a calculated blow. He knew her things were mostly books, research papers, and sentimental items from her family, things that held no monetary value to him. "Where am I supposed to go, Julian?" She asked the question, tasting like ash. The penthouse was in his name. The bank accounts had been systematically drained into trusts she couldn't access. Her lawyer, a timid man overwhelmed by Julian's legal Rottweilers, had managed to secure her a settlement that was, in Julian's world, pocket change. It was enough to live on for a year, maybe 2, if she was frugal. It was an insult disguised as a severance package. He smirked, a cruel twisting of the lips that never reached his televised eyes. "I don't know, Emma. That's your problem now, isn't it? You wanted to be independent. So be independent." He walked over to the island, picking up his pristine leather briefcase. He didn't even glance at her. He was already moving on. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. "I will." Her defiance seemed to amuse him. He paused at the door, turning back for one final devastating volley. His face was a mask of mock pity. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," he said, his voice dropping into the intimate conspiratorial tone he used on his podcasts. "You poured everything into me. You have no career, no connections of your own. You're, 36? Past your prime, darling. The world is a brutal place for women like you." He stepped closer, his expensive cologne suffocating her. He leaned in his voice a venomous whisper in her ear. "Let me give you one last piece of free advice, my dear ex-wife. No one will ever want you. You're nothing without me. You carry the stench of failure. Men of quality, men of substance, they want a winner. They don't want someone's discarded leftovers. You will die alone." He pulled back, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He had delivered his curse. It was the final brick in the wall he had built around her heart. And then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous empty space. For a long moment, Emma didn't move. She just stood there, his words slithering into the cracks of her broken confidence. "No one will ever want you. You will die alone." She finally let out a ragged sob, collapsing against the cold marble. The city lights outside blurred into a cruel, glittering mockery. Julian was right. She had given him her youth, her intellect, her loyalty. And in return, he had taken her name, her home, her future, and left her with nothing but a curse ringing in her ears. In that moment, sitting alone in the ruins of her life, she believed him. The next few weeks were a blur of beige. Beige boxes, beige walls of a tiny third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, and a beige, flavorless existence. Emma had found the apartment in a daze. It was all she could afford. The grand views of Central Park were replaced by a view of a brick wall and a perpetually overflowing dumpster. The scent of fresh orchids Julian insisted on was replaced by the smell of damp old wood and her neighbor's cooking. She unpacked the few boxes Julian's men hadn't accidentally misplaced. Her books, her precious companions, filled makeshift shelves. Her research notes on the artist Artemisia Gentileschi, a female painter who had triumphed over immense personal violation and patriarchal oppression, felt like a cruel joke. Emma had once dreamed of writing the definitive book on her. Now she could barely summon the energy to read the titles. Julian's curse echoed in the cramped space. "No one will ever want you." It became the soundtrack to her lonely nights. She'd scroll through social media, a masochistic ritual. Julian was thriving. He was photographed with A-list actors giving talks at prestigious conferences, and his new girlfriend, a model named Crystal, was splashed across his Instagram, always laughing, always perfect. He had already rewritten their history, painting himself as the patient husband who had finally freed himself from a negative and uninspiring partner. His followers lapped it up, flooding his comments with praise for his strength and authenticity. Emma's only lifeline was Chloe Davies. Chloe, a sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal art gallery owner, had been her friend since college. She'd never liked Julian, calling him a self-help vampire who drains the life out of everyone and sells it back to them in a paperback. Chloe showed up one Friday evening, armed with 2 bottles of expensive wine and a container of pad thai. She took one look at the apartment, and Emma's gaunt face and her expression hardened. "Okay, that's it," Chloe declared, setting the food on a wobbly IKEA table. "The moping is officially over. Operation Phoenix begins now." Emma gave a weak smile. "I don't feel much like a mythical bird, Chloe. More like a pigeon with a broken wing." "Nonsense," Chloe said, pouring a generous glass of Sancerre. "You are Emma Vance. You can spot a forged Botticelli from 20 paces, and you can recite Vasari's Lives of the Artists backwards. That sociopath didn't give you your brain. He just tried to convince you not to use it. We just need to remind you who you are." Chloe talked for hours, her voice filling the quiet apartment with life. She spoke of new artists, of gallery openings, of the vibrant world that Emma had been cut off from. Slowly, tentatively, Emma found herself engaging, correcting a point Chloe made about the use of lapis lazuli in the Scrovegni chapel, the old fire of her intellect flickering faintly. "See, she's still in there," Chloe said, pointing at her with a shrimp-laden fork. "Now for the main event." She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. The cardstock was heavy expensive. The calligraphy was elegant. "What's this?" Emma asked. "This," Chloe said with a flourish, "is your re-entry into the world. It's the St. Jude's Foundation Annual Benefit Gala, the biggest art world event of the fall. They're auctioning off a recently discovered Degas sketch. Everyone who is anyone will be there." Emma recoiled as if the envelope were on fire. "Chloe, no, I can't. What would I wear? Who would I talk to? Julian will be there. He's a patron." "First," Chloe said, ticking the points off on her fingers, "I have a friend at Marchesa who owes me a colossal favor. You will be dressed in a gown that will make angels weep. Second, you will talk to me. And third, screw Julian. Seeing you there looking magnificent and not giving a damn about him will be like a stake through his narcissistic heart. It's the perfect revenge." "I don't want revenge, Chloe. I just want to be invisible." "Too bad," Chloe countered. "Invisibility is cancelled. You've spent a decade in the shadows. It's time to stand in the light. Not for him, not for anyone else. For you. Remember the woman who wanted to write the Gentileschi book? The one who was passionate and brilliant? She wouldn't hide from a bully in a bespoke suit. She'd face him." Emma looked at the invitation. The St. Jude's Foundation. The very name felt like a sign. She thought of Julian's parting words, the poison of his curse. "You will die alone." Maybe he was right. Or maybe, just maybe, Chloe was. Maybe the only way to break a curse was to defy it. She took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached the bottom of her lungs in months. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "Okay, I'll go." Chloe's smile was triumphant. "That's my girl. Now let's finish this wine. We have a phoenix to raise from the ashes." The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and even more glittering people. The air hummed with the low thrum of powerful conversations, scented with expensive perfume and ambition. Emma felt a wave of vertigo. For years, she had navigated these events at Julian's side, a silent accessory. Tonight, she was on her own, and it was terrifying. Chloe, true to her word, had worked magic. The Marchesa gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that shimmered with every movement. It was elegant, understated, and fit her as if it were spun just for her. Her hair was swept up in a loose romantic chignon, and for the first time in a long time, the woman staring back at her from the reflection in a champagne flute looked not like a victim, but like herself. "Stop hiding behind the ficus," Chloe hissed, pulling her gently by the arm. "You look like a goddess. Own it." They circulated Chloe, greeting people with air kisses and sharp witticisms. Emma managed a few polite smiles, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She kept scanning the crowd for Julian, a primal sense of dread coiling in her stomach. The auction began. The auctioneer, a man with a plummy British accent and a theatrical flair, charmed the room into parting with extraordinary sums of money for art vacations and experiences. Emma found herself genuinely captivated by the art, her professional eye assessing the works, her mind momentarily distracted from her anxiety. The main event was the Degas sketch, a delicate, intimate drawing of a ballerina tying her shoe. Bidding was fierce, paddles shooting up across the room. Emma watched mesmerized when she saw him. Julian. He was sitting at a prominent front table, his arm possessively around Crystal's chair, his paddle held high. He wanted the dagger. Of course he did. It was a trophy. Emma felt a chill and turned away, needing to escape. "I need some air," she murmured to Chloe, slipping away from their table towards a set of French doors that led to a small, secluded terrace. The cool night air was a balm. The terrace was blessedly empty, overlooking a quiet courtyard garden. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes, trying to will away the image of Julian's smug face. This was a mistake. She wasn't ready. "It's a beautiful piece, isn't it, the dagger?" The voice was deep, calm, and startlingly close. Emma's eyes snapped open. A man was standing a few feet away, half hidden in the shadows, looking not at her, but out at the garden. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but he wore it with a kind of casual indifference, as if it were a second skin. "Yes," Emma found herself saying, her voice a little breathless. His use of line, "It's so economical, but it captures the entire weight and strain of the moment. It's not just a pretty picture." The man turned his head slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his profile in the dim light. Strong jaw, thoughtful eyes, an air of quiet intensity that was the polar opposite of Julian's performative charisma. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. "Most people just see the ballerina," he said, his gaze now on her. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, like a stormy sea. "You see the work." A blush rose on her cheeks. It was the first time in years anyone had seen her, and not the woman standing next to Julian Thorne. I studied art history. It was my field." Was he asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice? She corrected herself, a spark of her old self igniting. "It is my field." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Good." An awkward, yet not uncomfortable silence fell between them. From inside, they could hear the auctioneer's voice rising to a crescendo. "Sold to Mr. Julian Thorne." Emma flinched, the sound of his name a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold returning. The stranger's perceptive eyes missed nothing. "You know him," he stated. It wasn't a question. She gave a wry, bitter laugh. "He's my ex-husband. The divorce was finalized yesterday." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She instantly regretted it. Why was she dumping her baggage on this handsome stranger? But he didn't recoil or offer empty platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded like he actually meant for the turmoil, not for the divorce itself. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. "It's fine. I should go back inside." "Wait," he said, taking a step closer. The space between them seemed to crackle with an unexpected energy. "My name is Alistair." He extended his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. A jolt, like a static shock, shot up her arm. "Emma," she replied. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma, who sees the work." He held her hand for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. As she turned to walk back inside, her heart doing a strange, unfamiliar flutter, he spoke again, his voice soft. "For what it's worth, he didn't deserve that sketch. He only sees the ballerina." Emma walked back into the ballroom, her mind reeling. She didn't see the rest of the auction. She didn't even notice when Chloe returned to the table. She was consumed by the brief, intense connection with the man on the terrace, Alistair. As the gala wound down, Chloe helped her navigate the exit. They were waiting for their car when a flurry of activity erupted near the main entrance. A swarm of paparazzi, who had been waiting for a politician to leave, suddenly turned their lenses towards the doors. Alistair emerged. And suddenly, Emma understood. The flashes were blinding. Shouts of his name echoed in the night. Alistair Sterling. The Alistair Sterling. The reclusive tech billionaire. The prodigy who had made his fortune in sustainable energy and now ran the Sterling Foundation, one of the world's largest philanthropic organizations. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence here was a major event. He seemed unfazed by the chaos, his expression impassive as his security team tried to clear a path. His gaze swept the crowd, and for a heart-stopping moment, his eyes met Emma's. There was a flicker of recognition, a ghost of the smile she'd seen on the terrace. Chloe was gaping. "Oh my God, you were talking to Alistair Sterling, the great white whale of the Forbes list." Before Emma could answer, the crowd surged. A clumsy photographer stumbled backward, bumping into Emma and sending her off balance. She gasped, expecting to fall, but a strong hand shot out and caught her arm, steadying her. Another hand instinctively found hers, lacing their fingers together in a firm, protective grip. It was Alistair. He had broken from his security cordon and was suddenly right there, his body shielding hers from the jostling crowd. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned, meant only for her. She could only nod, speechless. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the paparazzi, the shouting, it all faded into a dull hum. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand, the solid presence of him next to her. It lasted only for a few seconds. His security team quickly enveloped them, guiding them towards a waiting black sedan, a car far more imposing than the Uber they had called. He opened the back door, still holding her hand, and looked at her. "Let me give you a ride," he said. It wasn't a request. Dumbly, she nodded again and slid into the plush leather interior. Chloe scrambled in after her, wide-eyed. Alistair followed, and the door shut with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in a cocoon of silence. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights behind. Emma looked down. Her hand was still linked with his. Across the street, hidden in the shadows, a freelance paparazzo, who had missed the main scrum, lowered his camera. He hadn't gotten a clear shot of Sterling's face, but he'd gotten something else, something intimate and intriguing. A close-up of their hands perfectly intertwined, a story in a single frame. He smiled. This was better than a politician. This was gold. Emma woke up to the sound of a hurricane. Not a literal one, but the digital tempest of her phone vibrating violently on her bedside table. It buzzed and chirped with a relentless, frantic energy she'd never experienced before. Groggily, she reached for it, her mind still fuzzy from the surreal events of the previous night. Alistair's driver had dropped her and Chloe off, a polite and formal goodbye hanging in the air. The feeling of his hand in hers lingered like a phantom limb. She squinted at the screen. 347 new text messages, 98 missed calls, a torrent of notifications from Instagram, Twitter, and news apps she didn't even remember installing. Her blood ran cold. This was the kind of attention Julian received, not her. Her thumb trembled as she swiped to open a text from Chloe. It was a string of incoherent capital letters and a link. "Chloe, Emma. Oh my God, holy Sikh, look at this now." With a deep sense of foreboding, she clicked the link. It took her to the homepage of TMZ. And there it was. The lead story, the photograph. It was an artful shot, tightly framed and undeniable. Two hands. Her hand recognizable by the delicate silver ring her grandmother had left her, was entwined with a man's larger, stronger hand. The cuff of a tuxedo and a sliver of an impossibly expensive-looking watch were visible. The headline screamed, "Mystery Woman, Reclusive Billionaire, Alistair Sterling, in Shockingly Public Romance." She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She scrambled to open other news sites. Page 6. The Daily Mail, Vanity Fair. It was everywhere. The same photo. The same breathless speculation. Who is Alistair Sterling's secret girlfriend, the handhold seen round the world? Sources say the woman is a stunning brunette who spent the evening at the St. Jude's Gala with the tech mogul. She was the mystery woman, the stunning brunette. It felt like she was reading about a character in a novel, not herself. Then her stomach dropped as she saw the comments section. The digital mob was already at work. Sleuths were trying to identify her. And then someone did. A gossip columnist with a long memory posted a picture of her from 3 years ago standing behind Julian at a book launch. The narrative shifted with whiplash speed. Update: Sterling's mystery woman, identified as Emma Vance, ex-wife of self-help guru Julian Thorne. And that's when the second storm hit. Julian's storm. He hadn't waited. He hadn't stayed silent. He had gone on the offensive with brutal surgical precision. He posted a statement on his Instagram, a platform with 20 million followers. It was a masterclass in manipulation, cloaked in his signature brand of faux vulnerability. The post was a picture of him looking pensively out a window, a cup of tea in his hands. The caption began, "Friends, many of you have been asking me about the recent news. It is with a heavy heart that I must address this. As you know, I have recently gone through a painful and private separation. I have tried to handle this with dignity and grace, wishing only the best for Emma. To see these photos today is deeply concerning." Emma felt sick. Concerned, I have always been a supporter of Emma, even as we grew apart. But I fear she is in a vulnerable place right now. To see her latch onto a man of such immense wealth and power so quickly, literally the day after our divorce was finalized, is alarming. I pray that she is not being taken advantage of, and that this is not a cry for help or a desperate attempt to fill a void. I am worried for her well-being. I will be making no further comment on this matter, as I wish to focus on healing. Please send her your positive energy. It was diabolical. In one fell swoop, he had painted her as a mentally unstable, desperate gold digger. He was the concerned, sensitive ex-husband. She was the pathetic, grasping woman. He had co-opted the language of therapy and wellness, a language she had helped him perfect, and turned it into a weapon against her. The comments were a tidal wave of vitriol aimed squarely at her. Wow, she didn't waste any time, did she? Gold digger alert. Poor Julian. He's so classy. She's clearly a mess. I knew there was a reason he left her. She sounds like a parasite. Hope Alistair Sterling sees her for what she is. She's just using him for his money. The curse. You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. He was making it come true, not by magic, but by the brute force of public opinion. He was branding her, defining her for the entire world, before she could even speak a word in her own defense. Her tiny apartment felt like it was closing in on her. The brick wall outside was a prison. She curled into a ball on her bed, the phone lying face down on the floor, still buzzing, still spewing poison. The shame was suffocating. He had won. He had utterly, completely destroyed her. She had defied his curse for one night, and in return, he had unleashed hell. The tears she had held back for so long finally came not as a gentle rain, but as a racking, hopeless storm. The knocking was soft at first, then more insistent. Emma ignored it, pulling a pillow over her head to block out the world. It was probably a reporter or a process server with a cease and desist letter from Julian's lawyers for besmirching his good name. "Emma, it's Chloe. Open this door right now, or I'm calling the fire department and telling them I smell gas and a crazy woman with a vintage toaster." Reluctantly, Emma dragged herself to the door and unbolted it. Chloe swept in her face a mixture of fury and concern. She was holding a large bag from a fancy bakery and the morning papers, which she promptly threw in the trash. "Don't read that garbage," she ordered. "I've already seen it. That man is not a human being. He's a sentient weaponized press release." Chloe took in Emma's tear-streaked face and crumpled form, and her expression softened. "Oh, honey." She enveloped Emma in a hug. "Don't you let him do this to you. Don't you let him win. He already has Chloe," Emma croaked. "Look at what they're saying. The whole world thinks I'm some desperate, grasping social climber. He knew exactly what he was doing." "Of course he did." Chloe said, her voice steely. "This is his playbook. Control the narrative, isolate the target, publicly humiliate. He did it to that journalist who wrote a critical profile of him 2 years ago. Remember? He's a predator." Just then, Emma's intercom buzzed, making them both jump. Emma stared at it in terror. "Don't answer it," she whispered. "It could be the pizza I ordered for moral support," Chloe said, trying to lighten the mood. She pressed the button. "Who is it?" A calm, male voice, devoid of static, came through the speaker. "It's Alistair Sterling." "For Emma Vance." Emma and Chloe froze, staring at each other in disbelief. "Alistair Sterling. Here, at her third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn." "Let him in," Chloe hissed, suddenly galvanized. "For God's sake, Emma, buzz him in." In a daze, Emma pressed the button. A few moments later, there was a quiet knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find him standing there. He was dressed not in a tuxedo, but in dark jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a lightweight jacket. He looked younger, less intimidating, but the same quiet intensity radiated from him. He was holding a small, unassuming cardboard box. "Miss Vance." "Emma," he said, his gray eyes searching her face. He saw the tear tracks, the fear. His expression wasn't one of pity, but of a kind of grim understanding. "I know this is an intrusion. May I come in?" She could only nod, stepping aside. He walked into her tiny living room, his presence making the space feel both smaller and safer at the same time. He glanced around at the bookshelves, his eyes lingering on the titles. "I came to apologize," he said, turning back to her. "My presence last night and my carelessness brought this circus upon you. I am truly sorry for that." "It's not your fault," Emma said, finding her voice. "It's his. It's my world that has invaded yours," Alistair countered, "and I have some experience with this, which is why I'm here." He placed the box he was carrying on her coffee table. "This is for you." She opened it cautiously. Inside was a sleek silver device. "It's a secure, encrypted satellite phone," he explained. "Untraceable, unhackable. My personal number is the only one programmed into it. Your current phone is a liability. The press can track it. It can be hacked. This is safe." Emma stared at him, bewildered by the practicality and foresight of the gesture. "I also saw his statement." Alistair continued, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "It was a cowardly and calculated attack. He is attempting to define you before you have a chance to define yourself. I will not allow that to happen." Chloe, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway like it was a tennis match, finally spoke up. "Damn right. But how do we fight back? He has 20 million followers who think he's the second coming." Alistair met Chloe's gaze, giving her a nod of respect. "You don't fight him on his battlefield. You don't sling mud. You render his attacks irrelevant by telling the truth, but on your own terms." He looked back at Emma, his focus entirely on her. "He's accused you of being a gold digger. So we show them you have no interest in my money. He's painted you as unstable. So we show them your strength and intelligence." A spark of anger, hot and clean, finally burned through Emma's despair. "He built his entire empire on my work." The words hung in the air. Alistair's expression sharpened. "What do you mean, his book?" Emma said, the story pouring out of her now. "The Architect of You. It was supposed to be my book. My dissertation was on the philosophical concept of the self in Renaissance art, how artists and thinkers of the time constructed their public and private personas. It was about authenticity legacy, building a life of substance. I had a manuscript, years of research. Julian, he took it. He read it, simplified it, stripped out all the academic nuance, and repackaged it with pop psychology buzzwords. He stole my soul and sold it as a self-help guide." Chloe looked horrified. "Emma, you never told me it was that direct." "I was ashamed," Emma admitted. "And he convinced me that no one would ever believe me, that it was our project." Alistair was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. He looked from the pain in Emma's face to the bookshelves crammed with her life's passion. "Do you have proof?" he asked quietly. "Drafts, notes, emails." Emma's heart leaped. "Yes, they're in storage, old laptops, boxes of notes. I have everything." Alistair's expression was now one of cold, clear purpose. He was no longer just a handsome stranger or a reclusive billionaire. He was an ally, a powerful one. "Then we have a new plan," he said. "We are no longer on the defensive. He wrote that he's concerned about you. Let's give him something to be genuinely concerned about." He looked directly at Emma, and for the first time, she saw not just kindness, but a deep, formidable strength that he was offering to share. "He tried to take your voice, Emma. I think it's time the world finally heard it." The next week was a whirlwind of covert operations and quiet strategy orchestrated from Alistair Sterling's minimalist Soho office, a place that felt more like a modern art gallery than a corporate headquarters. There were no reporters outside, no paparazzi. Alistair's world was protected by a level of security and discretion that was an art form in itself. His team, a small group of fiercely loyal and terrifyingly competent individuals, retrieved Emma's boxes from storage. They worked with a forensic IT specialist who recovered every draft, every time-stamped note, every email exchange from her old hard drives. They laid it all out on a large conference table, a mountain of evidence that traced the intellectual genesis of the Architect of You directly and unequivocally to Emma. There were her early manuscripts full of complex academic arguments next to Julian's later dumbed-down versions with his handwritten notes in the margins changing her phrasing into marketable sound bites. It was a clear and damning paper trail of intellectual theft. Seeing it all laid out, Emma felt a profound sense of validation, followed by a surge of cold fury. "He didn't just steal my words," she said to Alistair, her voice shaking with emotion. "He stole my entire thesis on life. And then he used it to lecture the world and me about authenticity." Alistair stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Over the past few days, Their alliance had deepened into something more. They'd spent hours talking not just about Julian, but about everything. She learned about his own past with the media, a vicious, untrue story about his family that had made him retreat from public life years ago. He learned about her passion for Artemisia Gentileschi, and he listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel seen and heard in a way she never had with Julian. A quiet, powerful intimacy was growing between them, forged in the crucible of their shared crisis. "He won't get away with it," Alistair said, his voice low and resolute. "Now, we need to choose our moment." The moment presented itself a few days later. An invitation arrived for Julian to be the keynote speaker at the Global Integrity Summit, a Davos-like conference for tech leaders and media personalities. His topic, dripping with irony, was truth and transparency in the digital age. "It's perfect," Chloe said, her eyes gleaming. "It's his home turf. He'll feel untouchable. The hubris will be off the charts. He'll have the whole event locked down," Emma countered, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. "I can't just walk in and accuse him." "You won't have to," Alistair said. He tapped a few commands into his tablet. A picture of a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut appeared on the screen. "This is Sarah Jenkins. She's moderating his keynote. She's one of the toughest investigative journalists in the business. She owes my foundation a favor for funding her documentary on dark money in politics. More importantly, she hates frauds." The plan was audacious. Sarah Jenkins, armed with a dossier of Emma's evidence, would conduct the Q&A after Julian's speech. She wouldn't ambush him with accusations. She would do it with his own words and with Emma's. The day of the summit, Emma felt sick with nerves. She wasn't at the conference hall. She was with Alistair and Chloe in a secure viewing suite nearby, watching the live feed on a massive screen. She had done her part. She had written a formal, eloquent statement and had given Sarah Jenkins her blessing to use her research, her words, her story. The broadcast began. There was Julian on a massive stage, bathed in a reverent blue light. He was at the peak of his powers, delivering a smooth, charismatic speech about the importance of living an authentic life. He even had the gall to reference his divorce. Recently, he said, his voice thick with false emotion, "I had to make a difficult choice to align my private life with my public values of honesty and growth. It was painful, but living your truth is never easy." Emma felt Alistair's hand find hers under the table. She gripped it tightly. Julian finished his speech to thunderous applause. He sat down beaming as Sarah Jenkins took the seat opposite him. She started with a few softball questions, lulling him into a state of comfortable arrogance. Then she shifted. "Julian, your book, The Architect of You, is built on a very powerful central metaphor of constructing a life. It's incredibly detailed. I was curious about your research process." Julian preened. "It was years of work, deep personal intellectual exploration. It really came from my soul." "Interesting," Sarah said, looking down at her notes. "Because I have here some academic papers from 2012, written by a then Emma Vance, that explore the exact same theme, the construction of persona in the Renaissance. The language is remarkably similar. For instance, you write, 'To be authentic is to be the sole architect of your own reality.' A fascinating turn of phrase. Almost identical to Ms. Vance's 2011 dissertation proposal, which states, 'The Renaissance ideal was to be the sole architect of one's public reality.'" A flicker of panic in Julian's eyes. The audience murmured. Sarah pressed on her voice like ice. "In Chapter 3, you discuss The Facade of Legacy, Ms. Vance's research uses the exact same term, the facade of legacy, in relation to the Medici family. On page 184, you use an anecdote about Michelangelo. That anecdote is lifted almost verbatim from an email Ms. Vance sent you in 2013, which we have a copy of. Shall I go on? The color drained from Julian's face. He was sputtering, trying to interrupt. This is an ambush. My work with my ex-wife was a collaboration. She was my partner. Was she a collaborator when you registered the copyright solely in your name? Sarah countered, her voice sharp. Was she a collaborator when you pocketed the entirety of the 8-figure advance? We spoke to your publisher. Her name is not mentioned on any contract. In fact, we have a statement from Ms. Vance herself. And then on the giant screen behind the stage, a picture of Emma appeared. Not a paparazzi shot, but a professional, dignified headshot they had taken days before. Beside it, her statement began to scroll. I am not a victim or a gold digger, the statement read. I am a scholar. The core concepts, the research, and the intellectual framework of the architect of you were my work. I am proud of that work, and I will not allow it to be used to promote a false narrative of authenticity, nor to be used as a weapon to publicly shame me. The truth, as Mr. Thorne is so fond of saying, has a way of coming out. The room was in stunned silence. Julian Thorne, the great guru of truth, was staring at the screen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, live in front of his most important peers. He was being exposed not just as a liar, but as a thief. The cameras zoomed in on his face, no longer smug, but pale and sweating. The architect had been unmasked, revealing nothing but a hollow frame behind the beautiful facade. The reckoning had arrived. The silence in the conference hall was a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. On the massive screen, Julian Thorne's face, once a carefully curated mask of enlightened confidence, was now a canvas of pure, unfiltered horror. The camera operator, sensing a historic moment, held the close-up, refusing to cut away. The world watched as the architect of you was publicly deconstructed beam by rotten beam. He didn't just look guilty, he looked erased. In the quiet viewing suite, the only sound was the sharp intake of Chloe's breath. Emma sat perfectly still, her hand held firmly in Alistair's. She wasn't watching Julian's face. She was watching the words on the screen. Her words, her truth, finally illuminated for all to see. It wasn't a feeling of triumph that washed over her, but one of profound, solemn relief, like a patient taking their first breath after a long and suffocating fever. The noise in her head, the constant echo of Julian's gaslighting, and her own self-doubt had finally ceased. Alistair squeezed her hand gently. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low. Quiet, she whispered, a small, wondering smile touching her lips. "The storm. I think it's finally over." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of profound respect. "No," he said, his grey eyes soft but resolute. "The storm is just beginning for him. For you, this is the dawn." The fallout was a digital tsunami. Before Julian could even be escorted off the stage by stunned event staff, the clip was being sliced, diced, and shared across every platform. Thorne fraud. The Great Pretender and his stand with Emma Vance exploded globally. The initial trickle of outrage became a flood. Celebrities who had once touted his book as their Bible posted, hurried statements of condemnation. Brands that had sponsored his podcast issued press releases severing all ties. His publisher, facing a public relations nightmare, released a statement within 3 hours. In light of new information regarding the authorship of The Architect of You, we are immediately suspending all promotion and distribution of the title and will be conducting a full review of our relationship with Mr. Thorne. It was corporate speak for a public execution. Crystal, his model girlfriend, quietly deleted every photo of him from her Instagram feed. His powerful friends stopped returning his calls. The machine that had protected and promoted him turned on him with merciless efficiency. The final humiliating image came a week later, a grainy paparazzi photo of Julian unshaven and haggard in a wrinkled tracksuit, frantically putting trash bins out in front of his empty penthouse. The man who had preached about designing one's life looked like he had lost the blueprint to his own. Emma, however, refused to get drawn into the spectacle of his demise. While the world feasted on the schadenfreude she and Alistair were building, her new legal team, a phalanx of New York's sharpest minds funded by Alistair, moved with swift precision. The settlement meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a dictation of terms. Emma sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, as her lawyers laid out the undeniable evidence of intellectual property theft and demanded reparations, not alimony, but a figure representing her share of the book's profits and damages for copyright infringement. Julian's legal team, knowing they were beaten, folded without a fight. With the first transfer of funds, she didn't buy a new apartment or a new wardrobe. Her first act was to sign the charter for the Vance Institute for Historical Studies. Its mission was clear: to fund and promote the work of scholars, particularly women, in fields historically dominated by men. Its first grant was awarded to a young art historian who had discovered compelling evidence that a famous sculpture attributed to a 17th-century master was in fact the work of his uncredited and forgotten sister. Her next meeting was with the acquisitions editor of a prestigious university press. The editor, a woman with kind eyes and a deep respect for academia, didn't just want to publish her original manuscript on Gentileschi. She wanted to publish a new expanded edition. "We also want you to write a new introduction," the editor said, "about your journey, about what it means to reclaim a narrative, your story. It's as important as the history you write about." For the first time, Emma cried. Not tears of sorrow or anger, but of overwhelming gratitude. Throughout it all, Alistair was her silent, steadfast partner. He never overshadowed her, never spoke for her. He simply created a space where she could be heard. Their relationship, born in the glare of a media firestorm, settled into a rhythm that was quiet, private, and deeply authentic. One evening, he came to her small Brooklyn apartment, the apartment she had decided to keep a reminder of, where she had started her new life. He found her covered in flour, attempting to bake bread, her tiny kitchen a chaotic mess. He didn't laugh at the mess. He simply rolled up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, washed his hands, and started helping her knead the dough. "You know," he said, his hands working alongside hers, "my life was very orderly before I met you. Every minute scheduled, every interaction vetted. I'm sorry for disrupting it," she said with a small smile. "Don't be," he replied, stopping to look at her, his eyes serious. "It was orderly, but it was grey. You brought the color back, Emma. You make the noise of the world bearable." A few months later, they stood on the terrace of his penthouse. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The space, unlike Julian's cold, minimalist trophy home, was warm and lived in, filled with books stacked on every surface and art that was challenging and personal. He handed her an advance copy of her book, The Power of Persona Artemisia Gentileschi and the Forging of a Legacy, by Dr. Emma Vance. Her name, her title, her work. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters. I used to stand in a place just like this and feel like the smallest person in the world, she confessed, her voice soft. He told me that I was nothing without him, that I would die alone. Alistair wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. He was a fool, he murmured into her hair. A man that insecure could never understand a woman like you. He didn't understand the irony of his own curse. Emma leaned back against his chest, finally understanding. He thought it was an ending, she said, a sense of wonder in her voice. But it was a catalyst. If he hadn't said those things, if he hadn't pushed me out so cruelly, I would never have gone to that gala. I would never have met you. I would never have found the courage to fight for my work. Julian's curse wasn't a prophecy. It was an accidental gift. His attempt to consign her to oblivion was the very thing that had forced her into the light. He had meant to be the architect of her destruction, but instead, he had merely laid the foundation for her magnificent reconstruction. She turned in Alistair's arms, looking up at him. The love she saw in his eyes was not the possessive, conditional affection she had once known, but a deep, quiet partnership built on mutual respect and a shared truth. The city lights below no longer seemed to mock her, but to celebrate with her. It was a new dawn, bright and clear and infinite with promise, and it was all hers. Emma Vance's story is a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by someone else's opinion, especially the opinion of those who try to diminish us. It's a testament to the fact that the end of one chapter, no matter how painful, is often the necessary prelude to a far better one. Her journey from a cursed ex-wife to a celebrated scholar, hand in hand, with a man who saw her for who she truly was, shows us that the most profound comebacks are rooted in reclaiming our own truth and our own voice. Julian's curse was meant to be her prison, but it became the key that unlocked her true potential. If this story of resilience, justice, and unexpected love moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the most incredible real-life dramas. What did you think of Julian's takedown? Let me know in the comments below.